Hello and welcome. You're watching News Central TV. I am Judith Atibi. The top stories at this hour. Organized labor kicks as Federal Executive Council steps down memo on new minimum wage demands consultation. 21 persons killed in violent attack by armed group in Niger Republic. African Union voices concern following violent clashes in Kenya. Details shortly. Of the continent, Nigeria, where the Federal Executive Council postponed consideration of the memo on the new minimum wage during their meeting, allowing President Bola Tinubu to engage in more consultation with stakeholders. News Central's business correspondent Perpetual Fasomi Peter samples opinions of Nigerian employers, employees, analysts and economists on this long walk to a new minimum pay. Here's a report.
A proposed minimum wage of 62,000 naira is currently before the president for assent, even as organized labor insists on 250,000 naira monthly pay. And for the organized private sector, that is too much for them to pay. Well, I'm here to gather the thoughts of Nigerians to know what they think about the minimum wage.
Honestly, with the cost of things right now, averagely, I think 100K is just fair.
Minimum salary that each one should be receiving should not be less than 150,000 naira.
For many respondents, anything less than 100,000 naira is nothing. However, this is not a one-way conversation, as there are many dynamics to it.
So when there's an increase in wage, it means that businesses will have to pay more for labor. Their cost of services, cost of production tends to increase. That's where the government monetary policy and the fiscal policy now tends to play. They have to put in the shock to make sure that inflationary triggers don't go above.
We should begin to look at how to devise a means that the minimum wage for civil servants may not necessarily be the general minimum wage for SMEs, because that may actually cause a lot of issues.
I think we should look at the differentials in the cost of living across different states, and also the differentials in the capacity to pay. We cannot compare the capacity to pay of the federal government with the capacity to pay of some state governments or of local governments.
Equity seems to be the word here, yet some analysts believe otherwise.
So if the private sector is increasing price, everything is increasing. It now comes to paying. You now say that you don't have money. So what have you been doing? Part of your cost is salaries and wages. It's part of cost. So if you are saying cost is what has driven prices, why is the cost not inclusive of cost of labor? We have to be fair to ourselves.
For many Nigerians, the ideal minimum wage, or salary as the case may be, should be around 250,000 naira per month. But given the current economic climate, the hope for an agreement around 100,000 naira monthly between the government, labor, and the organized private sector. Here at News Central, we will continue monitoring the situation. In Lagos, for News Central, I am Perpetua Fasomi Peter.
In the meantime, organized labor has expressed dissatisfaction with the Federal Executive Council's decision to step down the memorandum regarding the tripartite committee's report on the new national minimum wage. The Nigerian Labour Congress criticized the FAC's move, highlighting the potential for harmful speculation. Head of Public Relations for the NLC, Benson Opa, voiced concerns over the FAC's failure to consider the memorandum during its meeting. He said delaying the tripartite committee's report leaves room for injurious speculations. Now, following the council meeting, Minister of Information Mohammed Idris said the FAC decided to step down the memorandum to allow for further consultations. Now, these discussions, according to him, will involve President Bola Tinubu, state governors, local government authorities, and the private sector. Meanwhile, Nigeria's Apex Bank has announced that the country's headline month-on-month inflation rate slowed for a third time in a row in May 2024. The Central Bank of Nigeria says the headline inflation decelerated in May to 2.14% from a month earlier, slowing from 2.29% in April and 3.02% in March, according to the National Bureau of Statistics. News Central's Joshua Imarayi was on the ground as Nigerians reacted to the development. Take a look.
Following the recent statement of Central Bank of Nigeria claiming that Nigeria's rising inflation rate has slowed down for the third consecutive month in May 2024, some Nigerians have expressed skepticism, stating that the decrease is not reflecting on the prices of goods and commodities in markets. Despite the positive inflation statistics, experts say several factors are contributing to the persisting high inflation rate, which is taking its toll on citizens.
The first factor, will be, the global climate, challenges that we have, that are now triggering, the insurrections, if you may, and then the other factor will be your high cost of transportation. So if you put all this together, it is one word, your inability to be able to rein in, or develop programs or actions for adaptation and mitigation of the challenges that will come from the climate crisis.
As for me personally, speaking for myself, I think everything is pretty much the same. Nothing has really changed. I don't know what the central bank is saying when it comes to my livelihood and that of my family. When I go to the market, what it tells, the value I'm able to purchase goods for, is not anything that signifies any reduction.
Seriously, it's not reflecting on anything. The prices keep going higher and higher. I'm just coming from the market right now. Let's say the fish I usually buy, the smallest 800. I'm buying it at 1,000 today. For me, and one will not be enough. I have to go with two. I pleaded with the woman. She's like, it's not her fault. She usually buy carton at 40-something, but now it's 50-something thousand.
In fact, I want Mr. President to do something urgent about this problem so that people in this country will have their complete living standard. Because right now, things are going, people are suffering. That's the truth. The policies are what matters to reduce the hardship of the masses.
While some experts are advocating for patience and understanding from citizens, others are calling on government to take proactive steps to address the current food crisis in the country. In Abuja for News Central, I am Joshua Imarayi.
Let's now give you some updates on the situation in Rivers State, where we understand that more protests have continued to rock the south-south Nigerian state in support of police occupation of local government secretariats across the 23 local government areas of the state to maintain law and order. This time around, it is the National Youth Council of Nigeria, NYCN, Rivers State chapter, led by its factional chairman, Musabari Bani. Now, speaking during the Solidarity March to the police command headquarters on Moscow Road, Port Harcourt, Bani said the barricading of the secretariats by the police has prevented hoodlums from vandalizing the facilities. Now, Bani urged the police to remain in the local government secretariats pending the decision of the appeal court, the state political matters before it. Now, while calling on the police not to vacate the secretariats, Bani urged the IGP, Kayode Egbetokun, to give the command the needed support to restore peace in the council secretariats in the state. In his response, the Rivers State Commissioner of Police, Olatunji Disu, said the state is important to the economy of Nigeria and so would not allow any breakdown of law and order.
Oga, come up for road now.
don't need to snap you. Okay, come back.
You know when police want to cause confusion like this.
Many complexities with the Rivers State political crisis. I have a guest joining me after this break. Stay with us. You're welcome back. As promised, we said we're going to be discussing the complexities of the political crisis in Rivers State. And now to join me live via video chat is former Chief of Staff to ex-Governor Wike, Mr. Tony Okocha. Mr. Okocha, a very good morning to you, and thank you so much for coming on. Let's just get started with the solidarity march by the National Youth Council of Nigeria that we've seen. Let's talk about the significance of this recent solidarity march so far. As you can see on the screen there, showing for our viewers. The match happened in Port Harcourt, the capital of Rivers State. How does it reflect the political climate in Rivers State?
Well, the political climate is very much tensed. But again, let me first and foremost make a little correction. I was Chief of Staff to former Governor Mechi, not former Governor Wike.
Apologies for that mistake. We'll correct that. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you. Okay, now I was saying that the states, the political state, landscape here is so highly tensed. You wake up every day, you see, just walk past a score of people demonstrating, protesting over one thing or the other, whether frivolous or just because they want to protest. But we thank God that it has not degenerated to full-blown war. You recall that a few days ago, I had called for the state of emergency in the state. That state of emergency call was cautionary. And I'm happy that both the federal government and even the governor himself, are putting in place things that will avert such development. One of it from the federal government is the fact that they had deployed security men to man the 23 local government headquarters. At least that is one serious intervention that they have done. So the governor, I'm thinking, somebody had told me that there are plans to bring in some of the boys that came out from the shanties, that came out from the creeks, brandishing sophisticated weapons. Also, by and large, we are beginning to have some quiet. Yesterday, yes, there were demonstrations almost in all the local governments of the states. The essence of the demonstration was not anything negative. It was a peaceful protest. They were there. They were at their local government areas to support the police, the IG's decision to take over the councils, because that's the best way out of it, in the best of all possible world. Should the councils be open as we speak?
I'm glad you just brought up. I'm glad you just brought up the IG and the police command, coming in front of the secretariat and just trying to be on top of the matter. And which takes me to my next question about the role of the Inspector General of Police in this crisis. What are the implications of continuing, police occupation of the council secretariat complexes?
Well, I should think that it is safer, even if they have to occupy for 1 year. But I know that in a couple of days, in a few days, the Court of Appeal would have given judgment on the matter before them, which is, which the local government issue is a part of it. At the time they make a decision one way or the other, they will know who legitimately should go into the council. As we speak now, because that decision has not been made, arguments have been entered left and right. Both parties, the Court of Appeal had reserved judgment on the matter. So when they take that decision, whichever way they go, the other group will know that, well, we have lost it. So they would not take the laws into their hands to go there to harass or attempt to harass the legitimate people that should occupy the place. So I have nothing against the IG. I have nothing against the CP other than to continue to eulogize them for coming in timely, in the states. Otherwise, by now, the local governments, at least long ago, would have all got bonds.
Right.
There would have been crisis, of course. You know that when two people feud, when there's a feud between two people, what else do you expect? What you can possibly expect is that there will be a breakdown of law and order.
Mr. Okocha, I have to ask, right? So you have clamored for a state of emergency given the political crisis, and as a member of press, and even as an ordinary Nigerian, just looking at the political crisis in Rivers State, it begs to ask a bigger question of: is this not taking away all this political crisis and how it's unfolding in the last 1 month and even weeks prior? Does this not take away from governance? And how then do we now, effectively address this and bring an end to this, this deepening crisis, so everyone can go back to the table and what they are there for, which is governance?
But if you listen to my arguments, and maybe I should state now, I stated that the governor had become adamant to councils, including the council of the highest citizen of this country, Mr. President. You're well aware of the intervention of the president and the 8 items that made what we call the presidential proclamation therefrom, and that he had blatantly disobeyed crucial aspects of that agreement. That's one. The second is the fact that the governor had remained adamant. He had remained, he is almost like, how will I put it now? He has become a teen god. Okay? Because his governor, he feels that his powers are elastic, he can make and unmake. He refuses to listen to councils. I've talked about the one of Mr. President.
I think we've lost Mr. Okocha's audio there. Mr. Okocha, we're struggling to hear. You've lost your audio there for a second. But if you're just tuning in, that's Mr. Tony Okocha is the ex-chief of staff for ex-governor Amechi. Move on now away from Rivers State and now to the Federal High Court in Lagos, as it has ordered the final forfeiture of the sum of $1,426,175.14 linked to former governor of the Central Bank of Nigeria, Godwin Emefiele. Justice Ayokunle Faji ruled that the funds be permanently forfeited to the federal government. This final ruling follows an application by the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission. The EFCC had initially secured an interim order for the temporary forfeiture of the money on May 29th of 2014. The court mandated the publication of this order in newspapers to allow any interested parties to come forward and contest the forfeiture. At the hearing, EFCC counsel Bilikisu Buhari Balla confirmed that the publication order had been fulfilled and that no claims to the funds had been made. As a result, the court proceeded with the final forfeiture. Away from that now, and this time on to more this time press. Nigerian journalists have been tasked to be more sensitive in reporting conflicts and violent extremism so as not to promote the objectives of terrorist groups. Now, this was during a training organized by the National Center for Counter-Terrorism for Defense. Correspondent in Abuja, Amadi Uyi, reports.
Nigeria has been battling a homegrown insurgency in the last 12 years. While this has led to the death of thousands, millions have also been displaced, therefore putting a strain on governance. Nigeria's Minister of Information and National Orientation says that this is evident of the effects of terrorism as it stalls national development, which affects the lives of citizens.
It is important for all of us to know that terrorists are not just fighting a physical war on all of us. They are also fighting a psychological one. Terrorism is not a merely physical threat. It is an ideological battle of the mind, with the extremist groups exploiting our vulnerabilities, spreading fear, and propagating messages that present them as fighting for a social cause, in order to further their depraved agenda of crippling our nation.
As counterterrorism experts converge on Abuja for a training of journalists in the country, they say that training is key as it will help promote peace and improve conflict-sensitive reporting. They say the role of the media cannot be overemphasized, as it provides government with alternatives to extremist ideologies.
This training is being conducted to build the capacity of journalists in the country in order to promote peace, education, patriotism, and encourage conflict-sensitive reporting towards attaining Mr. President's vision of guaranteeing a safer and peaceful Nigeria for all citizens.
In the fight against terrorism, the media can either undermine or bolster our collective efforts to provide alternatives to extremist ideologies. And this is very important, alternatives to extremist ideologies.
They also add that Nigerian journalists can contribute effectively to the war against terrorism, playing key roles as partners to government.
Journalists are strategic partners in the fight against terrorism and violent extremism, and they offer various perspectives on insecurity, social, economic, and political issues to the public through their contents.
Journalists who were in attendance were also tasked to be more sensitive in reporting conflicts. In Abuja for News Central, I am Amadine Uyi.
Following the recent impasse between some state governors and traditional rulers in the domain, some civil society organizations have called on the federal government to take over the control of traditional institutions. Now, they say this will bring an end to the recent clashes that have seen several traditional rulers disposed by their governors in recent times. A situation they claim is an abuse on the nation's traditional institutions. News Central's Imano Bogudu reports.
The dethronement of monarchs in Nigeria is becoming more rampant and interferes with the administration of traditional institutions in the country. Some Nigerian governors who have explored their constitutional powers to sack sitting monarchs include the former governors of Ondo, Rivers, Ebonyi, Edo, Zamfara, Kebbi, and most recently, Kano State. There are some who think this is an abuse of the sacredness of the nation's traditional institutions.
To some of us who are not from Kano, we were scared, like, how would a politician have so much power over an institution as sacred as the Emirate of Kano?
As reports claim that the Sokoto state government currently intend on deposing the Sultan of Sokoto, some civil society organizations say this brings to fore the issue of control of traditional institutions and their relationships with peace and order in the society.
I'm trying to also draw the reference from the United Kingdom that political institutions and traditional institutions can coexist peacefully without any rancor. It's seen all over the world where monarchical systems of democracy or government thrive. The issue in Kano now. Who is trying to bring the balance? It will be the federal institutions that are trying to bring some kind of balance right now. Otherwise, for the state, the decision has been made, and you cannot blame the current setup. It is not a doing of theirs. It has been done before. They have a claim they are trying to reset back to normalcy, back to what the institution used to be.
To talk and engage the people. Then the thing is that it's better for Nigeria as a country to actually ensure that there must be constitutional review that will bring the traditional ruler on board to give them responsibility in order to ensure peace, development in the community and Nigeria as a whole.
The governors are too powerful. They are too powerful. They are unchecked, and The responsibility of you and I as Nigerian citizens is to look at the quality of people we are sending to the state houses of assembly. In Nigeria today, apart from political imbroglio happening in Rivers, mention one state house of assembly that is properly checkmating their governor. There is none.
Nigerians will be hoping that the abuse of traditional institutions by the nation's political elite comes to an end. They say both organs should instead work together for the development of the society. In Abuja for News Central, I am Emmanuel Bagudu.
Meanwhile, the Sokoto State House of Assembly has moved the Sokoto Emirate Council Amendment Bill through its first and second readings. If enacted, this bill will significantly reduce the powers of the Sultan of Sokoto, Said Abubakar III, including his authority to appoint kingmakers and district heads without government approval. The legislative action follows closely on the heels of concerns raised by the Muslim Rights Council on Monday. Murik's executive director Isiaq Akintola issued a statement warning about an alleged plan by Sokoto State Governor Ahmed Aliyu to depose the Sultan. He emphasized that the Sultan's role is both traditional and religious, serving as a spiritual leader for all Nigerian Muslims, not just those in Sokoto. The controversy echoes recent upheavals in Kano State, where several monarchs were deposed, adding to the tension and uncertainty surrounding traditional leadership in the region. Now, today marks the International Day Against Drug Abuse and Illicit Trafficking, a global observation or observance that addresses a critical issue affecting health and social well-being worldwide. Now, this day symbolizes the global determination to intensify action and cooperation to achieve a drug-free world, as drug abuse remains a significant threat to global health and societal well-being. The annual campaign aims to raise awareness about the severe consequences of drug use, including physical and psychological harm, overdose deaths, and various societal problems. Now, this year's World Drug Day theme, "The Evidence is Clear, Invest in Prevention," underscores the urgent need for evidence-based strategies to combat drug abuse. And I'll talk about the complexities of drug abuse prevention, treatment, and societal impact. And I'm joined by a consultant psychiatrist and lecturer, Dr. Abiri. Dr. Abiri, a very good morning to you, and thank you so much for coming on.
Today.
All right, let's get started, shall we? As we observe the International Day Against Drug Abuse and the Illicit Trafficking, I would like for you to talk about the most, significant challenges in curbing drug abuse globally.
Well, so I would like to start locally and then I'll drive it globally. If we had to look at Nigeria locally to say that these are the major challenges in curbing the drug abuse problem, we'd start with denial. We seem to always want to be in denial and pretend like the problem is not there. There's a lot of denial, there's a lot of ignorance, there's a lot of shame, there's a lot of stigma. And of course, there's a lot of discrimination against people who abuse substances, largely because when we look at the problem of substance abuse, we think of a moral viewpoint. This person knows what they're doing, it's their choice, but we must start to, come to a place where we understand that initially it may have been a thing of choice, but after a while, it becomes a disease because the brain becomes rewired in such a way that the individual moves from use to abuse and then, of course, to dependence. And so I think that, the major problems with managing drug abuse lies on the fact that until we come to a realization that there's a problem, until we come to that awareness, until we come to the acceptance that it is a problem that not just affects individuals or families, but it's a problem that affects all of us, regardless of where we are all over the world. Those are the major challenges, if you do ask me.
And let's talk about evidence-based prevention strategies, giving the theme for this year, which is invest in prevention. I beg your pardon. So how is it that the strategies, how can they be effectively implemented in communities most at risk of drug abuse?
Evidence, of course, in our line of work would usually go back to data. Data drives interventions. What data do we have? Are we looking at the data? Are we taking the data? Are we, observing the trends? And so over the past couple of years, what we've seen is that, the age of initiation of use of substances has reduced significantly. Previously, you would think that it was, within the teenage years, but these days you hear stories of, people who are as young as 7, 8, depending on difficult life experiences that they're exposed to. So people in places where there are wars, where there are, intertribal conflicts, are more likely to be exposed to substances of abuse. And so until we have the right data and we're willing to look at that data, not to dismiss it, beyond looking at the data, we must, of course, take the pain to do the research. So a lot of times when we compare ourselves to Western countries, we say that, there are a lot of problems here, but many times the problems are seen through the lens of international organizations because we're using their data. And so while efforts are in improving and increasing at ensuring that we get the data from here, and then we translate that data to interventions that work locally for us, because first of all, we must realize that the drug problem might be global, but of course, we also have local trends. We have local patterns of use. We have local interventions that are likely to work when we look at them as compared to, things on a global scale. And so, yes, we must do the research. We must take the data. We must be willing to look at this as a multifaceted problem, not just a problem that affects a certain, socioeconomic status or a certain demographic.
Right.
If and when we look at all of those things, of course, we'll be able to make more impact.
Well, Dr. Abiri, one cannot take out mental health from drug abuse. I always say this every single time, that when you see a person who's addicted, 9 times out of 10, mental health plays into the matter. So, but let me ask you, you're the professional here. What role does mental health care play in preventing and treating drug abuse, right? And then how can these services be made more accessible, especially in our climate?
Well, so mental health, thank you very much for that, session. Mental health, of course, refers to the state of the mind, an individual's ability to successfully perform the functions of thought, emotion, cognition, and other aspects of behavior. Now, usually when we look at things like, substance abuse, we would say that the relationship with mental health can be bidirectional, in the sense that substance use or abuse can lead to mental health problems, while mental health challenges, when people are trying to, cope with their difficulties, with their symptoms, hearing voices, having unusual experiences, they may also turn to substances of abuse. Now, how does mental health, tilt people towards use or, avoidance of substance abuse? Again, things like, exposure to trauma, traumatic life experiences, the exposure to parents who are also using substance, the exposure to things like, dysfunctional family settings, difficult environments, when we have poverty, when we have a lot of ignorance, when we have a lot of disease, when there's financial instability, when there's difficulty in the environment, some of these things, take a toll on people's mental health. Things like loss in terms of, the loss of a loved one, the loss of a relationship, the loss of a job. Whenever people are taxed, whenever people feel overwhelmed, they...
Doctor, we seem to have lost you there. Doctor, your network there is frozen. We lost her there for a second, but that's Dr. Bojubola Abiri, and she's a consultant psychiatrist and lecturer. She was just talking to us about addiction and the role that mental health plays as the world commemorates World Drug Day. Move away from that now, and this time to Niger Republic, where the Defense Ministry has declared 3 days of national mourning starting today in response to a violent attack that claimed the lives of 20 troops and 1 civilian. The attack occurred on Tuesday near the village of Tasaya. According to ministry's statement, a coalition of terrorist armed groups targeted security forces, resulting in 21 martyrs, including 1 civilian, and injuring 9 others. In retaliation, several dozen assailants were killed, and both aerial and ground reinforcements are being deployed to pursue the remaining attackers. Tasaya is located in the Talabiri region, which borders Mali and Burkina Faso. Now, this area has been plagued by a bloody insurgency led by rebels linked to Al-Qaeda and the Islamic State group for nearly a decade. And as protest continues in Kenya, the head of the African Union Commission, Musa Faki Mohammed, has expressed deep concern on Tuesday over the deadly unrest sparked by anti-tax protest in Kenya. In a statement, Mahamat urged for a calm and called on all parties to refrain from further violence. The protest escalated into violence, with police firing live rounds at demonstrators, leading to fatalities and extensive damage, including the storming and ransacking of Kenya's parliament. Mahamat appealed to Kenya's national stakeholders to engage in constructive dialogue to address the underlying issues that sparked the protest, emphasizing the importance of prioritizing Kenya's stability and well-being. The African Union reaffirmed its solidarity with the government and people of Kenya, urging them to uphold peace and security across the country. And joining me now on the news for an update on the situation in Kenya, George Kimado, Executive Director, Tuza Kenya Initiative, joins me live via video chat. George, thank you so much for coming on. Let's just get started quickly because we're pressed for time. How do you think the Kenyan government's response to the protest, including the use of force, will impact the country's political stability and even international reputation moving forward? I just saw on the news a few hours ago, a conference that the president was supposed to give a keynote speech on has now been cancelled. But let's hear your thoughts, please.
Good morning. Thank you very much for that. First and foremost, the protests were very peaceful initially. And I think the government involvement on the latter times and causing the violence that occurred there was very, very bad in terms of reputation for the country. You know, we have made very good gains, even internationally. And if you look at the president's recent travels and the network that he has made time and time again internationally, that reputation of Kenya as a peace haven is badly damaged. Just yesterday, the first 400 policemen that were sent to peacekeeping in Haiti landed this morning, actually. So the question that comes in is, if Kenya is participating in peacekeeping missions abroad, and you have issues locally, then how does that leave you, in terms of the national community? I mean, in their eyes, then it's like a house that is not in order, and that is not good for the country. And I think and then the other thing that we keep asking is, this protest started last week, and there was no violence at all. The turn of events yesterday was quite unprecedented, and I think it takes a lot of effort by the government to restore order. Today, things are quiet, but back to your question, in terms of reputation, that has been quite damaged, and it's not good for the country.
George, I can only imagine, and our hearts goes out to those who have lost their lives, giving the reports, and those who are even injured, and those who are on the front line clamoring for change in Kenya, which is just was initiated by the financial tax bill. Now we're going to take a very short break. George, I need you to just hang on with me. We'll take a short break. When we come back, we'll continue more. This is News Now on News Central TV. Stay with us. Don't go anywhere. Hey, welcome back. Now, before the break, we were talking about the protests in Kenya as Mahamat, who is the head of the African Union Commission, Musa Fika Mahamat, have expressed deep concern over the deadly unrest sparked by anti-tax protests in Kenya. And earlier, joining me via video chat was George Kimado, who is Executive Director, Tunza Kenya Initiative. George, thank you so much for holding on right there for us. Before the break, we were talking about how the protest started out very peacefully, and by yesterday, it pretty much just, metamorphosed into a civil unrest at this point, and it became very violent. But what are the factors what factors do you believe are driving the protests in Kenya? Now, besides at first we thought it was a financial tax bill that was now signed, and even though the government has moved to say, okay, we're going to take back some of this statements that we've made, we'll still leave the tax as is, this is now metamorphosed into a different type of protest. So what do you think is fueling this protest at this point, and how do you think the government could address the underlying grievances of the protesters?
All right, thank you very much for that question. Number one, I think the finance bill was just the trigger, or what you call the last strike that broke the camel's back. There has been simmering issues in Kenya about unemployment, There's been a lot of frustration in terms of the economic downturn that has been there. The promises that were made by the current government, which is barely 2 years in office, there is a lot of disaffection against the ruling political class because of those promises that were made have not been met. So there was a lot of things that were simmering on the ground. So when the finance bill came, and then just like last year, there was a step that you take before it is taken back to Parliament, something called public participation, whereby the public gives its views. Again, just like last year, over 90% of the people gave the views that a lot of things in that bill should be removed. Then people go back to Parliament, the MPs, and then the same thing that people say they should not be included, they're unchanged. So it seems like it's an exercise in futility. So I think this was just a trigger. So people are also protesting the kind of the corruption in government, wastage of government resources. You are asking people, as a president, for instance, you're telling people to tighten their belts, that we are going through tough times, but then the people around you, and even you yourself, there's a lot of wastage in government.
Right.
So people are getting...
Now, George, then how then can the government address the grievances? Because we're pressed for time very quickly. How can they effectively address these grievances? Because you're saying now that this is long awaited, and this particular move by the government was what broke the camel back. What can they do?
Dialogue. But then there are three things that the government needs to do. Even as to dialogue, but fundamentally it's about dialogue. Call people together, call all the stakeholders together, let them talk. Let them seek consensus amongst people on the things that are affecting them. But principally, there's the issue of more so the youth, because, just to take you back a little bit, is that much of this, the protests have been led by the youth, right? People between 18 to about 35 years. Those are the main participants in these protests. So there's need to seek consensus and seek people's views, and then stick to what people talk about. But then number two things, there's the issue about corruption, which people feel is the largest driver of the economic downturn that people are facing, and then also to curb government wastage. But fundamentally, the government needs to talk to its people.
Well, George, I want to say thank you so much for just being patient and just giving us your insight. If one wants to look at the case in Kenya and the entirety of Africa, corruption literally is the bane of our existence. But George, thank you so much for coming on. And that was George Kimado. He is Executive Director, Tuza Kenya Initiative, and he joined me to give us update on the protest in Kenya. And that's all at this hour on News Now. But before we go, let's take another look at some of the major stories. Organized labor kicks as Federal Executive Council steps down, memo on new minimum wage demands consultation. 21 persons killed in violent attack by armed group in Niger Republic. We also told you that African Union voices concern following violent clashes in Kenya. Now remember that you can send us your eyewitness report to the WhatsApp number now showing on the screen. And while you're at it, make sure to follow us on social media. We're at News Central TV. You can also watch News Central live on DSTV channel 422, Star Times channel 274, Avo TV and YouTube. Many thanks for watching. I am Judith Atibi.